I used to think I was boring in the best way. I tracked every dollar in a spreadsheet, color-coded and reconciled Sunday nights. I didn't carry balances. I didn't treat myself with money I didn't have. I was 39, renting a small apartment outside Boston, and working as a barista while taking night classes in bookkeeping because I wanted out of service work before my knees gave up. I had a plan and I respected it. The cafe was in a renovated mill building with exposed brick, high ceilings, and the kind of rent that forces you to sell $7 lattes like they're a spiritual experience. We had regulars who ordered the same thing every day, and I liked that. Predictability felt like a handrail. My financial stress wasn't dramatic. It was steady. My son, Noah, needed orthodontic work, and the insurance covered almost none of it. My car was paid off but old enough that every new noise sounded like a bill. I wasn't drowning, but I could see the waterline. So when an older man stepped up to the register one gray morning and said, "Coffee, black," I didn't register him as anything but another customer. He looked tired, well-groomed, quietly expensive, like he belonged in airports and boardrooms, not in a cafe where the bathroom lock sometimes jammed. I served him without thinking. Felt like nothing. He came in just after the morning rush. The line was gone. The espresso machine had stopped screaming, and the whole place settled into that lull where you can hear the grinder and someone's laptop keys. He watched the menu like he was reading a language he used to know. "Large?" I asked. He paused. "Medium," he said, then corrected himself. "Whatever you call it here." "We call it a 12, I said and poured his coffee. He paid in cash. That stood out. People rarely used cash anymore, and when they did it was crumpled singles. His bills were crisp, like they'd been handled by someone else. He left a 20 in the tip jar without looking at me, without the performative smile some people use when they want praise for being generous. He took the cup and sat by the window, coat still on, hands around the paper sleeve like he was holding warmth more than caffeine. I noticed after a while that he didn't drink it. He just stared through the glass at the traffic, jaw tight, as if he was listening to an argument in his head. My manager, Lila, whispered, "That guy's been here 3 days. Maybe he likes the view," I said. "Maybe," she replied, but her tone suggested she didn't believe in maybes. I told myself it wasn't my business. That's how I stayed calm. Keep your lane, count your drawer, go home. But on day 4, he looked up when I wiped the table next to him and said, quietly, "You're careful." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Your hands," he said. "You count back change like it matters." Did matter. It was rent. It was braces. It was a fragile illusion of control. I should have laughed it off. Instead, I said, "It's my job." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. It used to be my job too, in a way. That was the first time he hinted at having had a normal life, and it made me less suspicious. Wealth usually announces itself. His didn't. He didn't wear a flashy watch or talk loudly on the phone. He wore plain clothes that fit too well and looked like they'd never met a discount rack. He introduced himself on the 5th day. "I'm Richard," he said. "I'm Dana," I replied, keeping it polite. He didn't ask for my number or tell me I had a nice smile. He asked what time we closed. I told him. He said, "Do you ever get tired of being watched?" I almost said no. I almost told him customers weren't watching me. They were watching their phones. But I understood what he meant. Service work makes you visible in a way that doesn't come with power. "I'm tired of being needed," I said, surprising myself. Richard's eyes softened, just slightly. "That's expensive," he said. I assumed he meant emotionally. Later I understood he meant literally. He came back the next day and left another 20. Lila stared at the tip jar like it might tip over. "Who is he?" she asked me. "I don't know," I said, and that was denial, comfortable, intentional. Not knowing felt safer than knowing. That night, Noah asked if we could start his braces sooner. "My teeth hurt," he said, rubbing his jaw. I told him, calm voice, "Soon." Then I opened my spreadsheet and watched the numbers refuse to cooperate. The orthodontist's office smelled like mint and plastic. The receptionist quoted the down payment and the monthly payment, and I nodded like it was manageable. On the drive home, I did the math 3 times, because doing it once felt like admitting reality. I told myself I could pick up extra shifts. I told myself the bookkeeping classes would lead to a better job before the payments crushed me. That's how I stayed restrained. Tell yourself the future will rescue you if you behave. The next morning, Richard asked, "You look tired." "I'm fine," I said automatically. Denial is a reflex. He watched me steam milk, then said, "Fine is expensive too." I glanced up. "Do you always talk like a fortune cookie?" He smiled, faint. "No, usually people pay me for it." That line should have set off alarms, but I was too busy trying not to think about braces and rent. I was also, if I'm honest, flattered by the attention without flirtation. He treated me like a person whose choices mattered. 2 days later, he slipped an envelope under his cup when he left. I didn't see it until I cleared the table. It was thick. I opened it in the back, expecting a note. It was a cashier's check made out to me for $3,000. No memo line, no explanation, just my name, printed cleanly, and a bank watermark. My hands went cold. Lila saw my face and came running. "What is that?" "I don't know," I whispered. Lila's expression hardened. "Do not cash that," she said. "This is how people get owned." I wanted to believe it was kindness. I wanted to believe the world could still surprise you in good ways. I told myself it was just a gift. That was denial dressed as hope. I cashed it anyway. I justified it with a calm internal voice. "It's legal tender. It's in your name. You didn't ask for it." I told myself that if a man had too much money and wanted to help, refusing would be pride. The money hit my account the next day. I paid the orthodontist down payment. I bought groceries without choosing the cheapest version of everything. I refilled my emergency fund, small as it was. Relief came like a warm bath, and I hated how good it felt. Then Richard returned, ordered coffee, and waited by the pickup counter instead of sitting. When I handed him the cup, he said softly, "Did it help?" I froze. "Aye." He didn't let me pretend. "I saw the way you count change," he said. "I know what that looks like." My throat tightened. Shame was right behind relief, tapping its foot. "Why did you do that?" I asked. Richard's gaze stayed steady. "Because you needed it." "That's not an answer," I said. "It is," he replied. "It's just not one you can trust." I felt heat rise in my face. "So there's a catch." Richard nodded once. "There's always a catch with money, even when it's clean." I wanted to push the envelope back across time, to uncash it, to restore the illusion that I'd earned every dollar in my life. But the braces were paid. Noah's next appointment was scheduled. My account balance looked like safety. Richard said, "I need something small." My stomach dropped. He added quickly, "Not criminal. Not what you're thinking. I just need a human." I didn't understand what that meant until later, when he asked me to do something that sounded harmless and wasn't. He asked me to meet him for lunch on my day off. I said no at first. Then I thought about Noah's braces and how quickly emergencies stack when you're one paycheck away from trouble. I told myself meeting for lunch wasn't a crime. We sat in a quiet diner near the waterfront. Richard ordered soup and didn't touch it. He watched the door like he expected someone to walk in and change the temperature of the room. "I'm being watched," he said. I almost laughed because it sounded paranoid. Then he slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a news article with his photo, older than the man in front of me, but the same eyes. The headline included the word, "billionaire." My chest tightened. "That's you." "Yes," he said, and his voice didn't carry pride. It carried fatigue. He explained, in careful language, that his company was being investigated. Regulators, lawsuits, investors. People want blood, he said. And money is just a way to measure how much. I wanted to stand up and leave. Instead, I sat there, because my relief had already turned into dependence and I could feel it. "I didn't know," I said. Richard nodded. "That's why I chose you." My stomach turned. "Chose me for what?" He leaned forward. "I need someone to deliver a message. Not electronically. Not through my lawyers. A simple envelope to someone who won't take calls from me. My relief curdled into guilt. I knew what this was. Money buying my obedience in small increments. That's dangerous, I said. It's necessary, he replied. I said no. I said it calmly, like I was proud of myself for setting a boundary. Richard watched me and didn't argue. Okay, he said. Then we're done. He stood to leave, and panic rose in me like acid. Not because I liked him, because I felt the floor move under the money he'd given me. My mind flashed to the brace's payment, to the possibility of him calling it fraud, of banks freezing accounts, of the IRS noticing. Richard paused at the table and said, almost kindly, "You're thinking the right way. Fear is a kind of intelligence." That line made me angry. "Don't talk to me like you're teaching," I snapped, and the anger surprised me because shame was still sitting in my stomach. Richard didn't flinch. "You're right," he said. "I'm sorry." He left, and I sat there shaking, realizing how quickly I'd begun to see him as the gatekeeper to my stability. 2 days later, 2 men in suits came into the cafe and asked for me. They weren't customers. They didn't order. They showed badges. They asked about Richard, about the cashier's check, about whether he'd asked me to do anything for him. My throat went dry. Awareness arrived, sharp, and it made my earlier denial feel childish. I told them the truth. He offered money. I took it. He asked me to deliver an envelope. I refused. One agent nodded slowly and said, "He's done this before." That was the first twist. I wasn't special. I was a method. After the agents left, Lila told me not to come in the next day. "We can't have this here," she said, voice tight. "It's bad for business." I understood. I nodded. I went home and told Noah I'd lost hours at work. I made it sound temporary. That night, my bank app wouldn't load. In the morning, my debit card declined at the gas station. I called the bank, and a polite woman said there was a review hold due to suspicious activity. Suspicious. My name, attached to his money, had become a warning flag. I felt shame first. Hot, humiliating shame that I'd let a stranger's wealth infect my careful life. Then anger at him, at myself, at the way money moves like it has its own will. I texted Richard, "My account is frozen." He replied within minutes, "I can fix it." That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a leash tightening. He told me to meet his attorney. A sleek office downtown, quiet carpet, receptionist who didn't make eye contact. The attorney, Ms. Kerr, slid papers toward me. An affidavit, a settlement, a non-disclosure agreement. The settlement amount was $40,000. My breath caught. With that, I could pay off debts, fund Noah's braces, maybe even put first and last month on a better apartment. Ms. Kerr said, "This compensates you for inconvenience." I asked, "What's the cost?" She tapped the NDA. Silence. Guilt mixed with relief flooded me. I signed. That was my morally questionable choice, and the relief was real. The settlement landed. My bank unfroze. My account balance looked like a different person's life. For a few weeks, I believed the crisis was over. I paid down my credit card. I set up a small college fund for Noah. I replaced my car's failing battery without calculating whether it meant skipping groceries. I slept through the night for the first time in months. Richard never contacted me. The cafe stopped scheduling me, then officially let me go. I applied for bookkeeping jobs and told myself I'd transitioned early. This was the false resolution. Numbers improved, so I assumed my life had stabilized. Then the IRS letter arrived. It was unemotional, which made it terrifying. It said I owed taxes on unreported income, with penalties, and the amounts referenced matched the cashier's check and settlement. I called Ms. Kerr. Her assistant said she no longer represented Richard. I called Richard's number. It was disconnected. The money that had felt like salvation became a weight. I'd spent part of it. Now the government wanted its share, and the payment plan would chew into my budget for years. I felt anger bloom into something steadier and uglier. He hadn't saved me. He'd shifted the burden onto me and walked away. Then the next twist arrived. a certified letter from a law firm informing me I might be called as a witness in a civil suit, and the NDA did not protect me from subpoena. My silence wasn't even safe. I met with a lawyer I couldn't afford and paid him anyway, because fear makes you reckless. He told me, bluntly, that the settlement could be characterized as payment for cooperation, even if I didn't cooperate. They'll argue narratives, he said. That's what money buys, stories. I remembered Richard's untouched coffee, his tired stare, the way he talked like he was just a man seeking quiet. It recontextualized everything. The cafe wasn't refuge. It was stage dressing. Then I saw him on the news, not in handcuffs, walking into a courthouse, calm, surrounded by lawyers. The anchor said he'd agreed to a settlement with regulators and would cooperate in exchange for reduced penalties. Several third parties provided assistance, the anchor added. Third parties, like me. I called the agent's card number. He listened, then said, "We suspected he used ordinary people as buffers. It helps him look human. It muddies money trails." I sat in my car and felt something hollow open inside me. He'd chosen me because I was careful and broke, because I was believable as a victim and disposable as a person. Noah asked if we were still okay, because he could sense my tension. I told him yes, because I didn't want him to learn early that money can rewrite your reality without asking. I paid the IRS plan. I kept applying for jobs. I tried to move forward. Then an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a statement for an investment account in Noah's name with $25,000 deposited. That was the third twist. He'd found a new way to hold me through my kid. The account had my information as custodian, my name, my social security number, my address. Someone had opened it without my consent, using details Richard's people must have had from the settlement paperwork. I called the financial institution. They said I could not close it without tax consequences and documentation, and they needed signatures that matched their records. Their records built on forgery. I felt shame, then anger so sharp it made my hands tremble. I wasn't just collateral anymore. My son was. I tried to contact Richard through public channels. I emailed his company's general counsel. I left messages with investor relations. Nothing. My lawyer said, "This could be an attempt to shelter assets or create goodwill evidence. Either way, it ties you to him." I wanted to refuse it, but refusing money isn't as simple as people think. Money can stick to you like oil. The account existed. It would generate forms. It would generate questions. It would sit in Noah's name like a quiet bomb. I froze the account, which was its own paperwork maze. I didn't touch the money. I kept records. I became the kind of person who photographs envelopes and saves screenshots because trust feels expensive now. Meanwhile, my own finances tightened again. The IRS plan, legal fees, job search limbo. The settlement money dwindled, and the relief evaporated, leaving guilt behind like residue. I took a temp job doing accounts payable for a contractor. Paid less than I hoped, but more than espresso shots. I told myself it was a clean reset. Then, in a deposition notice, I saw Richard's full legal name and realized something. The man I served coffee to wasn't just a billionaire. He was using my life as evidence of his humanity. I was deposed in a bland conference room with a court reporter and two attorneys who treated me like a file folder. They asked about my relationship with Richard. They asked if I'd ever delivered messages. They asked if I'd ever received instructions. They asked about the settlement and the NDA, as if my signature was a confession. I answered truthfully, but truth doesn't feel powerful when other people write the questions. Afterward, outside, I sat in my car and cried in a tight, silent way. Not dramatic, just tired. I felt used and stupid, and the worst part was knowing I'd been careful and still failed. I thought about the day I cashed that first check. I told myself I was doing the responsible thing for my kid. I told myself refusal would be pride. Now I saw the darker truth. I'd wanted rescue. I'd wanted money to appear without cost. That desire made me manipulable. That realization didn't feel like enlightenment. It felt like grief for the person I thought I was. The fourth twist came quietly. My temp employer's HR called me in and said, We found your name in public court filings. We're concerned about reputational risk. Reputational risk. Another way to say, your poverty made you touch the wrong rich man, and now you're contaminated. They ended my contract. I went home, opened my spreadsheet, and stared at numbers that no longer felt like control. They felt like a record of how easily I could be moved by someone else's wealth. Noah's braces progressed. His teeth straightened. His smile changed. I watched him become more confident and felt a pang because his improvement was funded, in part, by money that had harmed me. I sold my car and bought an older one in cash to avoid payments. I cut my budget down to survival again. I stopped telling myself the future would rescue me. I just tried to stay upright. Richard never called. The investment account in Noah's name remained frozen, a silent monument to power. My lawyer said leaving it untouched was safest, as if safety is always just picking the least damaging option. Sometimes I'd see Richard on television in passing, talking about philanthropy, about innovation, about second chances. His face looked calm, even compassionate. People in the comments called him misunderstood. I wanted to scream at my screen that compassion can be manufactured with money, that my life was part of his costume. But my NDA and my exhaustion kept me quiet. I began to understand something unsettling. Money doesn't just buy silence. It buys the ability to speak without consequences. I found a bookkeeping job at a small medical practice. The pay was modest, the work steady. I told myself to be grateful. One day, sorting mail, I saw a familiar law firm logo. My stomach tightened. Inside was a notice. The civil suit had settled, and certain third-party accounts would be audited for tracing. That meant Noah's account. It meant more scrutiny, more paperwork, more fear. I was back where I started, except now the threat had a child's name on it. The audit request came with deadlines and forms that assumed I had the time and competence of someone with resources. I spent nights filling out documents, calling hotlines, faxing things from a copy shop because the auditor demanded secure transmission. Noah asked why I was always on the phone. I told him work stuff. He rolled his eyes like a teenager and went back to his room, and I felt a dull ache that I couldn't protect him from my adult mess. The auditor eventually cleared the account as non-participatory, which sounded like mercy but wasn't closure. It simply meant they didn't need it right now. The account remained frozen, still there, still tethering us to Richard. I realized then that Richard's money had changed my life the way a stone changes a river, not by improving it, but by forcing it to move around an obstacle forever. I tried to date once, briefly, and found myself flinching when a man offered to pay for dinner. I insisted on splitting the bill with a rigidity that felt like virtue and was really fear. I kept my head down. I did my job. I paid my taxes. I watched Noah grow. People like to say money doesn't change you. I think that's only true if you already have enough. When you don't, money changes the rules of your nervous system. It teaches you which doors open, which close, which trap. One afternoon, I found an old tip jar photo on my phone. An accidental shot from a coworker's birthday. Richard's 20 was visible in the jar, bright and crisp. I stared at it and felt that old mixed feeling. Relief at what it paid for, guilt for what it cost. I'm not ruined. That's the honest part. Noah is healthy. His teeth are straight. We live in the same apartment, still with the alley view, but the bills get paid. I'm employed. I'm not in court anymore, at least not currently. But I also don't feel saved. There's no happy ending in being used as a buffer in someone else's financial war. The frozen investment account in Noah's name still exists. I could, in theory, fight to unwind it fully, but every attorney I've spoken to warns it could trigger tax consequences or renewed scrutiny. The money sits there like a locked room in our house. I pretend it's not there, but I know where the door is. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Richard's coffee going cold by the window. I used to interpret it as sadness. Now I see it as something colder. Performance. A man buying the appearance of ordinary life while moving millions through lawyers and settlements. I'm still disciplined. I still track every dollar. But the discipline no longer feels like control. Feels like vigilance. like I'm guarding a perimeter that can be breached by someone else's wealth at any moment. I don't tell Noah the full story. I will someday when he's older, not as a lesson, but because I don't want him to grow up believing money is only math. Money is also narrative. It's leverage. It's the ability to hand someone a check and rewrite what they can safely say about you. And if I'm honest, the most unsettling part isn't what Richard did. It's how quickly I accepted the first check, how easy it was to call it help, and how long it took me to admit that my need made me pliable. Some nights I lie awake and wonder if Richard ever thinks of me at all, or if I'm just a receipt in a file somewhere, proof that he once looked human while the rest of us did the accounting.